Hey everyone, I'm Paul with MadCap Software. In this video, I am going to take you through a really cool feature in MadCap Central, and that is single sign-on or SSO. So what is this thing? It is an authentication method that lets people log into multiple computer systems, but they only use one set of credentials. So you only have to remember one password, right? You might already be using this in your company. For example, you get up in the morning, you turn on your computer, you log in with your company credentials, and then you maybe open up something else and it's having you use the same credentials. You don't have to, remember separate ones. And this all runs through your company's identity provider account. Okay. So we're talking about working in conjunction with your IT department and getting things set up here. And so what goes on behind the scenes when you are set up with this, when you're using single sign-on, it's a series of tokens and cookies that are going back and forth. Somebody's trying to log in to an application, in this case, MadCap Central. And instead of saying, hey, what's your central password? Instead of that, the system is going, hey, identity provider, can you check on this person, make sure they're cool? It's okay to let them in. And so the identity provider is handling that. So there are several reasons why it's good to be using this. And by the way, this is something that it's especially important for bigger companies, enterprise level companies. That doesn't mean that smaller companies can't use it. Of course, anybody can use it, but larger companies are going to be most likely to be using an identity provider and wanting to control authentication that way. But this is optional. If you have a central license, you don't have to set up SSO at all. You can use Central the way that it's always worked in the past. You invite people and they respond to their email, they click the link, they come in, they set up their own unique central password, whatever they want, and that's just how they log in, log out. But if you want to use it, you can set your license up for SSO. And there are several good reasons to do this. One I already mentioned is, okay, first of all, fewer credentials that you have to remember. It's nice to have to only remember one password as opposed to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. All right, it's stronger authentication security by running things through your identity provider. It also, it simplifies things, the admin tasks for your IT department, because they're controlling, hey, these are all the employees in the company and these are their credentials. It's just easier to control the way things work from that one place. It also it can make things easier to onboard, to bring in brand new users by using single sign-on along with private output. If you happen to be generating some output, some private output, and it's meant, say, only for people in your company, not outsiders, and you want to protect that actually, I'm going to show it to you in this video, is an easy way to bring people onto your license, as opposed to going through the wizard, which you can still use, and setting up a CSV file or using that method. So it can be much faster and easier to do that. Another benefit is, let's say that somebody leaves your company and they were on your license, and the bigger the company, the harder it is to control or to know, who's this person and did they leave the company, and oh, they're still on the central license, they can get in. And if you are configured to use SSO on your license, well, that's going to be easier to prevent those ex-employees from gaining access because they have to go through the identity provider. And once they're gone from the identity provider, they just can't get in, even if they happen to be technically on your license still, which you can remove them, but they can't get in. So that's nice. Now, been talking about identity providers. That might be a new concept for a lot of people watching this. There are different identity providers out there that IT departments use. All right. Some of the big ones are Auth0 is a big one, Microsoft Azure Active Directory, Okta. Those are three of the really big ones. And so you can use any of those. The key is there are certain protocols that that identity providers use to do their stuff, right? And one of those protocols is called Security Assertion Markup Language, SAML. Okay. And as long as your identity provider supports SAML 2.0, you can use it. Okay. So you just want to make sure that you talk to your IT department. You make sure it's all good to go. All right. Now, what I'm going to talk about, this video is actually broken up into more chapters. This is just the introduction, but what I'm going to talk about next is we're going to talk about setting it up. I'm going to take you through all of those steps. After that, we'll talk about onboarding and especially focus on the thing that I was talking about with bringing people in really quickly and easily using private outputs. Just how does SSO affect onboarding people? After that, I'm going to talk about the login experience. What exactly do people see? What are they going through when they're logging in, logging out of Central when it's enabled with SSO? After that, we will talk about the logout behavior, because there's the login, but individual users, there's an option that they can control exactly how they're logging out. It's a little thing, but I'm going to, it's pretty cool, and I'll cover that. And then we'll wrap up by talking about just some questions, just random FAQs, questions that might be popping into your head. You're wondering about if you go with SSO. So that is what we're going to talk about in this video. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, you decide you want to use SSO on your license, so you got to set it up. Let's go into Central and walk through this. First thing you got to do is make sure that you got the right permission here, because anytime you're doing something that seems like a big deal, your chances are you're going to need permission to do that. So you come up and click on your name and open up your profile. And then over on the left, you select permissions, and you can see I have all the permissions in here. The one you want to make sure you have here is server management. That's going to allow you to set up SSO on the license. Okay, we're good there. So we'll just click cancel out of that. All right, now the next thing that you need to do, this is working with your IT department because they are in charge of your identity provider account, and so they need to enter information in there, and they need to give you some information. So you're going to be contacting your IT department to do this. So the first thing actually that you need to do is know what your vanity is, your license vanity. I'm going to go over here to my license avatar here. If you don't have an image set, it's just the initial of your license name. Select that, click on license settings, and you come down to settings, and mine's right here in this vanity field, FictionSoft Inc. Okay, you're going to need to know that because that is part of what you provide to your IT department. Let's get out of here. Now, what I would do is go into the Central Help. All right, and just look for, you can just search for SSO. That's the easiest thing to do. And you're going to get this information over here. This is actually the video you're watching right now. And so this is single sign-on, and you come down, there's the process. It's basically a two-step process. You got to obtain some information from the identity provider through your IT department or whoever's in charge of it. And then you're going to come back in and you're going to set up some stuff in Central. So go in here into this topic. All right. And you come down and it talks about seeing, okay, that's what I just told you, your vanity. In the IT department, they need to set up an application in the identity provider for your license, because as I said in the beginning, SSO is all about people being able to log into multiple computer systems with one set of credentials. Well, one of those computer systems is your central license, and so it has to have this information in there in your identity provider, and you have to have users in there. Their email addresses, who they are, so that they can then be onboarded onto your license. All right. So that vanity I had you look at, what you do is you come in here and you're going to provide your IT department with these pieces of information, these things that are in bullets here. And so these are URLs, the login URL, you need to provide that to them. And you just replace this bracketed part with your vanity. So in my case, my vanity is FictionSoft Inc. And so this is the login URL that I would provide to my IT department. Then you come down, and then you got the SAML endpoint, and this is the URL. And again, there's an example with FictionSoft Inc. as the vanity. The endpoint for sites, you provide that to them. The single logout or SLO. So you probably want to use the same URL as your login up here above, because when people log out, what do you want to open? Well, the login screen, so they could log back in if they need to. And so that's basically the same thing. And that's optional. You don't have to do that, but you can. One of the benefits of that is there is an option I'm going to show you later in this video that allows individual users control how they're logging out, what happens when they log out of the license. I just want to interject one thing real quick about this single logout, the SLO. This may not be supported by all identity providers. It's really only supported by identity providers that only use the username ID in the call to the endpoints. So what I would do is check with your IT department to make sure that your IDP supports this. Otherwise, you won't be able to use it. And then there's the SAML endpoint URL for CNAME sites. So this has to do with if you set up a host map domain for your outputs, right? By default, mcoutput.com is a domain, the central's domain that is used for your outputs. And so it might be fictionsoft.inc.mcoutput.com and then the rest of the path to your output. But a lot of people want to have their own. So they might have like help.fictionsoftinc.com, blah, 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 And so if you are doing that, if you set up a host map domain, and there is a video that talks all about doing this, if that's something you're interested in doing. So if you do that, you can also provide your IT department with this URL right in here, and you would replace this bracketed part with your host map domain. So for example, if my host map domain is help.fictionsoftinc, then this is the URL I would provide to them. And that is optional. Not everybody is creating host map domains, but if you are, you can provide that to them. All right, so that's what you're giving to your IT department. And then in return, they are going to give you back some information that you're going to plug into Central. So let's go back into Central and do that. Let's say that we sent this to our IT department, and then they come back and they give us this information. All right, so I'm back here in my license, and in order to set up SSO, click on my avatar, my license avatar, go to license settings, and then down here at the very bottom, single sign-on, click on that. And this is what you'll see. And it doesn't have anything set up yet. You have to click change settings. This is very important to click that to enable the whole thing. And now you're going to copy and paste the information that your IT department gives you, and you're going to put them into these fields. So I'm just going to pause real briefly here, and I'm going to paste mine in here so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what it might look like, depending on your identity provider, how things are set up. I'm using Azure Active Directory for this. And so this is the information that I got back and that I plugged in. Okay, so these first two fields, these are URLs in here, and then this is just a string that's my identity provider issuer. And then this is a really long certificate thing. It starts out like this, and then there's a whole bunch of numbers and characters in here. And you just paste it right in that field. Okay, now you come down here. This one I'm going to skip for now, this create viewer users on demand. That's what I'm going to talk about in the next section when I talk about onboarding and using private sites. We're going to leave that alone. Now, UI customization. This is the login button label. So when you are enabled with SSO, what happens is somebody goes, oh, okay, I want to log in to the license, and it brings up this simple UI, and there's a button on there. And by default, it says something like log in with third party, but you can replace that label with anything you want. So for example, I'm using Microsoft Azure, and so I might put in Microsoft login, something like that. Or you might put, company credentials, or just log in, whatever you want to put in here. You can control what that button label is. So then you just click save. And then this is all going to change here to show you exactly, what information is in on that page. And that's it. That is setting up your license for SSO. Now it is enabled. All right, so we have SSO enabled on our license, and now we want to make sure that we can onboard new users, that they are able to log in through SSO. And the first thing that you got to do is make sure those users are on the identity provider. And so you just kind of work with your IT department and make sure, all right, those people are on there. Okay, so now let's go back into Central and take a look at how this happens. I'm on the users page in the license, and you can see I've got 18 users in here that I've already brought in the past. And some of these are authors, some are viewers, some are subject matter experts. And so all of these people are on that identity provider, and they've already been onboarded. So how do you bring in new people? Well, you can bring people in the old-fashioned way, which is to click on add new user and go through the wizard, add them that way. That's no problem. And then once they're invited, they get the email, and they can, choose to log in. They're able to log in through the SSO. All right, so that's all fine and dandy. But as I mentioned before, one of the real benefits of SSO is that you're able to bring on a whole bunch of people using the viewer type to set them to the viewer type automatically if you have private output that you are publishing for them. So private output, people have to log in order to see it. And there's a whole movie on that if you want to learn more about private output. So let's go over to the sites page. So these are all the sites that control, the output that I want to publish. And you can see in this column there, I've got 4 of them that are listed as private sites. All right. And for example, this one, and you can see access. That means, okay, so what users or what teams are associated with this. And I have this team right here called private outputs. A private site has to be associated with a team, and you want to make sure that those people that can view the private output are part of that team. So it all just kind of joins together. And then this is the output link for those people to click and log in. So if I have this set up, I can just provide people with this link right here. And so this is much faster. Now, again, it is just going to bring them on as viewers, but you could still use this for authors and subject matter experts. It's just that they would initially come in as viewers, and then you could switch their output type to author or subject matter expert if you want. All right, so how do you do this? All right, I already have, you have to set up you have to publish, build the output that is going to be part of this site, create your site, make it private, associate it with a team. So this is my team right here called Private Outputs. And you can see on here that, all right, there's a whole bunch of users on here already. Okay, great. Go to your license settings here, come down to single sign-on and change settings. And it's this little checkbox right here, create viewer users on demand. So I've enabled it. So I'm going to be able to do this, but I also want to associate, I want to choose one or more teams. And so clicking this opens up, it displays my teams. Well, I know that I've set this team up specifically for my private output. So I'm going to choose that one, private outputs. I could choose other teams, additional teams if I want, but that's good enough. And I'm going to click save. So that allows all of this to happen and close out of this thing. Let's go back to the sites. And again, this is the output. Let's say that I want people to be able to see. I already pasted it in to a couple of other tabs. I'm going to pretend to be two new users who aren't in here. All right, if I go back here, I'm going to pretend to be Vinny Gambini and Mona Lisa Vito. If you look through my list of users in here, neither one of them is in here. They're not on the license, but I did make sure they were added to the identity provider. Okay, so first let's go into here, and if they go to that link, that output that I gave them, they're going to get a login like this. And it looks the way it does because I have this associated with a theme. My site is associated with a theme. And so that's why you see the blue button as opposed to another color. And that's why you see this logo up here. But here's Microsoft login. That is the custom text that I provided earlier when we set this up. Now I click this, and here it is. It's bringing up, it's noticing that, oh, you already have some accounts in here because I was already testing this and doing things with it. I'm going to add another account in here. All right, so I'm going to first sign in, pretend that I'm Mona Lisa Vito, so ML Vito, and just finish this. So it brought up this Microsoft login. So because I'm using Microsoft Azure Active Directory, that's the identity provider. If you were using another one, the logins would look different. And because it's been set up on the identity provider a certain way, that helps determine what kind of information that person needs to give you to authenticate themselves. And one of those things is, of course, the email. And what else is there? Well, click next. And in this case, it's a code. A code is being sent to their email, and they have to enter this in. But it could be something else. It could be it could be a password, or you might have two-factor authentication set up, so they might have to approve it on their smartphone, something like that. It's just, this is the way this one is set up. So I'm going to go to their email and get that code. All right, so here is the email. I'm going to open that up. There's my code right there. Copy that, come back to this one, paste this thing in here, sign in. So now you're almost there. It's actually going to send another email. So I'm going to go back there. Here's the other email. And it's asking me to confirm the account by clicking the link. You got to click login. There I am now. And there's the output. Okay, so that was just a little bit to get in. because of the way the identity provider has the authentication set up, but got in, not using a central password, didn't set up a central password at all. And if we go back here and we'll refresh this, there's Mona Lisa Vito, was brought in automatically as a viewer. And I could go through the same thing to bring in Vinny Gambini to Central, refresh. So I brought 2 users in without having to invite them to go through the wizard. So that's a real nice way. So if you've got 400 people, you want to make private output available to them in your company, they're already on the IDP, you just send them the link and they go through that process and they're onboarded. You didn't have to do anything, as opposed to, for example, I have some private output that I use for people in MadCap software. And before single sign-on, what I'd need to do is they have the link to the private output. They click on that. If they're not on my license, they have to send me a request. They have to wait for me to bring them on to onboard them through the wizard. And then they go in and so there's a little bit, it's a little bit more time because they have to send me the request. They have to wait for me and until they can get in. But this is a lot more immediate, a lot more automated. So that's really cool. And again, if you want to do this and bring in subject matter experts or authors, well, you can do the same thing. They initially come in as viewers, but let's say Jules Winfield, I want to change him to an author. Just click that. All right, make him an author, click save. And now I can go in because I have the user admin permissions, and I can go in and I can give him different permissions, treat him as an author. So that is how to onboard people with SSO. So you've already seen a little bit of the login process when I showed you the private outputs, but there's some more to go through that I want to make you aware of. And so I'm just going to take you through some different scenarios here, because what users are going to see and what they need to enter when they're trying to log in, it depends on different factors. Is it their first time logging in? Are they on multiple licenses or just one? How is the IDP identity provider set up? What kinds of information is it making you give them, making you give when you log in? So, few things. First, when somebody logs in first time, they might see a window like this, and you're looking at this going, okay, it's asking for my MadCap ID, my MadCap Central credentials, password. I thought single sign-on was all about not having to do that. It is, but somebody might see this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, they might have been directed to the general MadCap Central portal, right? Instead of going to a specific license that it knows is set up for single sign-on. And so if it just goes to the general portal, it doesn't know whether what license you want to go to, and it doesn't know if that license is set up for SSO. And so it is going to have to ask for your credentials in here. It would also show you a window like this if the license isn't enabled for single sign-on. So you have to give it a MadCap Central password in here. Now you can provide your email address and your central password here and click login, or you can click this button down here. And if you know what the vanity is, for example, mine is Fiction Soft Inc., and you could provide that and go straight to that license. Now, don't be confused by the URL up here, because I'm working on a test server, because at the time when I'm recording this, we haven't released any of this yet. So let me just put it in here for you. What you would actually see if someone were directed to the general MadCap Central portal, it'd be more like this. Okay, that's what they would see. Now, if somebody is directed to a specific license, they would see this instead, this simple UI. And again, don't be confused by that URL, because what you will actually see is something more like this. So that is my vanity there, Fiction Soft Ink, and then there's the rest of it. It knows that I'm trying to get to that license. All right, so let's say that I haven't logged in. I need to get into this license, and this is my first time. Click Microsoft Login. Again, there's that custom text that I had for that I set up on the license, and it's pointing to my identity provider, which is Azure. And so it's because of the way it's set up, it's asking me for this information. Now I'm going to log in first as Jeff Lebowski. Okay, and I'm going to click next. And you've seen this before, the way the IDP is set up. It wants me to give it a code. So I'm going to go into the email. I'm going to grab the code. Be right back. Okay, I copied the code. I'm going to paste it in here. Click sign in. And I'm in. Right? Didn't enter a central password at all. Now, if your license is not set up for SSO and this person logged in and then logged out, once they log back in, they have to provide the central password again. But the great thing about SSO is you don't have to do that. Jeff logs out, goes right back here, click log in again. He doesn't have to enter the credentials again. He's just logged back in. So that's pretty nice. And he is just associated with one license. And you can tell when you click that license avatar here, there's the active license right there. What if somebody is on more than one license? I'm going to take you through that real quick. So somebody who is part of multiple licenses, how do they, what's going to happen here? So first of all, there is this window again. Now, they can just go right into this license. They also have this option right here, which allows them to switch to a different license. And if they do that, then it's going to take them back to this window, which we saw before. And that's going to allow them, okay, click this button and go to a different license. I'm just going to log in here as a person that I know has more than one license. I'm going to be Lloyd Dobler. So he's already on the identity provider. He's already on the central license, just needs to log in. Clicking next here, got to enter the code. I'll go grab that code real quick. Okay, I copied the code. I'm going to paste it in here. Click sign in. All right, so he's logged in to this license, the FictionSoft license. If I click this right here, you're going to see he's actually he's a member of this other license right here too. He has options in here. He could click log into another license. It's probably just easier to come down here and select this, and then he would just log in to that license. Now, if he's already logged into the identity provider and this license is set up for SSO, you just get logged in. If this one isn't set up for SSO, he'd have to enter his other credentials. So that's the difference when somebody has multiple licenses. Now, it's also possible for a person who's on multiple licenses to see what we call the license hub. So in this case, Lloyd comes into this window right here. I'm going to have him add his email address. And his central password. All right, so he's trying to get in, but he's on multiple licenses. So it's going to bring up something like this. And it's telling him, all right, thanks. Thanks for coming back. Which license do you want to be on? You're part of two. And so he can click this one or click this one. And now, because he chose that, the license could have been set up for SSO, or it might not have. In this case, this one is. And so he's got to go through the process of logging in. to that, and he had already been logged in before, so he's in. So that's what it's like when someone has multiple licenses. Now, there's one little option that I want to show you that individual users can select when the license is set up for single sign-on. All right, I'm logged in as Lloyd Dobler in here, and the license is enabled for SSO. What this person can do is click his avatar or name up here, go to his user profile, and on the settings page, there's all this information, of course, that he can provide. If the license is enabled for single sign-on, you also get this little checkbox down here, and he can use this. This says log out of single sign-on identity provider when logging out of Central. What's this do? All right, so when the license is enabled for SSO, and this is not enabled, which is the default thing. I already showed you before. He could log out and then log back in, and he's in, right? He doesn't have to enter his credentials again, because even though he's logging out of MadCap Central, he's still logged into his identity provider. If he were to select this and click save, that would change the behavior just a little bit. So if he were logged in to the license and then he logged out, that would log him out of both MadCap Central and the identity provider. So then if he wanted to log back in, then he would have to enter the credentials once again. That's a simple little option. Just wanted to point it out because it is available to individual users on your SSO enabled license. Also, I just want to reiterate real quickly that the single logout SLO option that you set up with your identity provider, that field, that is only supported by some identity providers, so only the ones that only use the username ID in the call to the endpoints. And so that would affect whether you can use this option here. All right, so just keep that in mind. Check with your IT department on whether you can use this or not. I want to end this video with a section on some common questions that people might have. First of all, you have some existing Central users. They all set up Central passwords. What then? What happens? Well, nothing really. They just don't need to use those passwords anymore. If your license is set up with SSO, they're going to go through your identity provider. Now, if they do happen to go into the main MadCap Central portal where it doesn't yet know which license you're trying to get to, yeah, then they could still use those that password. Or if you happen to disable your license from SSO, they can use their password then, their central password. Otherwise, they just don't need to use it. They're going to use their credentials that are set up on the IDP, the identity provider. Another question that some people ask is it possible to gate new users coming into my central license with SSO? The answer to that is yes and no. Right now, it's not possible to use that automated method of onboarding users through private output and separate those users. Some users come on board and maybe they're allowed to see this output or allowed to see that output, or some users come on and they're viewers, and other users you choose that they're authors and you give them certain permissions. You can't do that using the automated method. When you use the automated private output method, everybody's pretty much going to come in the same. Let's go back to the user interface just to refresh your memory on this. So I set up the license, this license, went in here to license settings, and you come down to single sign-on, and you got to click change settings, and then you got your create viewer users on demand. We selected that, and I selected a team on here, and I could go select another team if I wanted. Maybe there's another team that I have associated with other private outputs, maybe this team. All right, so if I do that and I use this method to onboard people and I send them a link to the output, all right, they're going to be able to come on automatically but they're all going to be associated with both of these teams. And this team might be associated with some private outputs. This team is associated with other private outputs. So initially, everybody coming on is going to be a part of the same teams and can see the same outputs. Now, you can go into your central license after the fact, after people are in there, and you could change it. You could remove them from some teams, direct them to other teams. You could change, and everybody comes on as viewers, but you could change some people to be authors and give them permissions. But that's all kind of manual after the fact. If you want to use this automated private output method, everybody initially is going to come in the same. However, Central always has that other method of onboarding users, which is the new user wizard. So whether you're enabled with SSO or you're not enabled with SSO, you can use that wizard. And so you'll go through it and you'd invite one group of people. Maybe you want bring in a bunch of authors and give them certain permissions and associate them with certain teams. Then you want to bring in a whole bunch of viewers and they're on a certain team to see certain private output, and then another group of viewers to see other private output. Yeah, you can do that. It's just the more manual process. Another question is people might be wondering, all right, so Central works with MadCap Flare. You go into Flare and you can log in and log out there. What happens then if your license is enabled with SSO? Well, let me just show you a few things that you'll notice. Now, in MadCap Flare 2022 R2 and later, you're going to be able to use an interface that works with SSO enabled Central licenses. And you'll know that you're in one of those in a newer release of Flare, because in the upper right, you're now going to see this login button. And it's the same thing essentially as you go to view MadCap Central, there's your window pane, there's the login button there. So whether you click one or the other, it's going to do the same thing. So I'll just click one. And if you aren't going into a particular license, it is going to bring up something like this, which you saw earlier. And somebody's thinking, well, I don't even have a central password because I came in using that private output method. What do I do? Well, they can just click on log into a specific license. In our case, it is FictionSoft Inc. And this part, of course, will be different for you. And then they click okay, continue, and then they go through the login process. Then they'll click the button and they'll go in and enter their identity provider credentials and they'll get logged in. And I'll actually go ahead and do that really quickly so we can see what happens after you're logged in. So I'll just put in click next. It's the browser-based window. It's exactly the same as we saw before. Go to the email, grab the code, paste it in here, sign in. And that's it. Now, once you are signed in, your login button changes to your avatar, just like you see your avatar over here in the Central. And you click this, and now you get a drop down and you can open up the Central pane, which is this thing. You can open up the Central portal in a browser, and you can log out. You log out and it goes back to this. Now, once you've been logged in, you've already entered your credentials. You click this again. You don't have to enter the password again. Of course, you click Microsoft Login, and this one is set up so that it logs. I have this one set up just by chance that it was using that option we saw before where it says the logout behavior. It logged me out of my IDP at the same time. If you didn't have that set, then you wouldn't have to enter your credentials here. It would just log you right back into Flare. So those are the changes that you're going to see in Flare when it comes to SSO. Finally, another question is, well, what happens when somebody leaves the company? What happens then? Are they able to log in to your central license? Well, that's the really, really good news. There are two things that I especially like about this feature. One is that method of onboarding lots of people to private output through private output automatically as viewers. I really like that. And then I like this because somebody, let's say that your license is not enabled with SSO and somebody leaves the company, well, you have to just find out about that somehow and then go into your license and remove that person so they can't get access. But if you're enabled with SSO, they're just, the IT department removes them from your identity provider. And because of that, they can try to get into your license and they just can't get in anymore. So that's actually a really nice benefit of enabling your license with SSO. Okay, that is it. That's what I wanted to go through. And that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.